Can you imagine hearing these words from your own mother? Get out. You're not my daughter anymore. Those were the last words my mother said to me before she shoved me into the rain and locked the door behind me. I was 17 years old. I had no phone, no wallet, no jacket, just the clothes on my back and rain already soaking through my shirt. Within 48 hours, the police would call her with evidence that would make her blood run cold. But by then, the daughter she threw away would already be gone. I'm Mary Carroll. I'm 24 now, and this is the story of how my younger sister, April, framed me for a crime I didn't commit, how my mother chose to believe her lies without a single question, and how that rainy night became the worst and best thing that ever happened to me. Because when my mother slammed that door, she had no idea what get out would become. She thought she was punishing a thief. What she actually did was set free the one person who could have saved her from the monster sleeping down the hall. This is what happened next. If you've ever been the scapegoat in your family, if someone ever chose to believe a lie over your truth, this story is for you. Subscribe and join a community that knows what it's like to rebuild from nothing. You're not alone. It started with April's scream. Not a normal scream, but the kind of theatrical, glass-shattering shriek that could win an Oscar. I was in my room doing calculus homework when I heard it echo through the house, followed by the sound of my mother's footsteps pounding up the stairs like a stampede. My door flew open so hard it bounced off the wall. My mother stood there, her face twisted into something I'd never seen before, pure rage mixed with disgust. April was right behind her, tears streaming down her face, clutching something in her trembling hands. "How could you?" my mother hissed. Her voice was ice cold, which was somehow worse than yelling. April stepped forward, her whole body shaking, and opened her palm to reveal my grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones that had been missing from Mom's jewelry box for 2 weeks. "I found them," April whispered, her voice breaking perfectly on cue. "I found them in Mary's drawer, under her sweaters. And this." She held up an envelope, and I watched in horror as my mother pulled out a stack of $20 bills, easily $300 or $400. "That's not mine," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. "Mom, I swear, I didn't take anything. I don't know how that got there." My mother's laugh was bitter and sharp. "You don't know? They just magically appeared in your room?" April let out another sob, covering her face with her hands. "I didn't want to believe it either," she choked out. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation, but when I was putting away laundry and saw the jewelry box corner sticking out, I had to look. I turned to April, really looked at her, and for just a split second I saw it. The tiniest flicker of satisfaction behind those tears, a micro-expression that vanished so fast I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. But I hadn't. "April, tell her the truth," I pleaded. "Please." She just shook her head, devastated and perfect. My mother grabbed my arm so hard I knew it would bruise. "Get your things. Now." I tried to protest, tried to explain, but she was already dragging me toward my closet, yanking my duffel bag from the top shelf. "Mom, please just listen to me for 1 second. She threw the bag at my feet. "You have 10 minutes to pack, whatever you can carry. Then you're out of my house." April stood in the doorway, watching, and as my mother turned her back, my sister's tears stopped. Just for a moment. Just long enough for her to smile. The rain was coming down sideways by the time I heard the deadbolt click behind me. I stood on the porch for maybe 30 seconds, waiting for my mother to change her mind, to open the door and say this was all a terrible mistake. But the porch light went off, and I knew she wasn't coming back. I hoisted my duffel bag onto my shoulder and started walking. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have a destination. I just knew I couldn't stand there anymore. My phone was sitting on my desk inside, charging. My wallet was in my school bag, which was still in the kitchen. I had nothing except the clothes I was wearing and whatever I'd managed to shove into the duffel in those frantic 10 minutes. Some jeans, a few shirts, my yearbook, a stuffed rabbit I'd had since I was 6. The rain soaked through my hoodie within minutes, and my sneakers made wet squelching sounds with every step. I walked through our neighborhood, past houses with warm, glowing windows and families eating dinner inside, and tried not to think about how badly I wanted to be literally anywhere else. I must have walked for an hour before I saw it. Fletcher's Diner, a run-down chrome building with a flickering neon sign that said, "Open 24 hours." Through the rain-streaked windows, I could see fluorescent lights and red vinyl booths, and it looked like heaven. I pushed through the door, dripping water all over the checkered floor, and a waitress looked up from behind the counter. She was maybe 50, with gray streaks in her dark hair and tired eyes that had seen everything. "Honey," she said, taking in my soaked clothes and the duffel bag. "You okay?" I tried to answer, but my teeth were chattering too hard. She came around the counter, guided me to a booth in the back, and disappeared into the kitchen. 2 minutes later, she returned with a stack of clean towels and a mug of hot chocolate. "I'm Diane," she said. "And before you say anything, that cocoa's on the house." I wrapped my hands around the mug and felt tears burning in my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. She sat down across from me, studying my face with an expression I couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe mixed with recognition. "You running from something or toward something?" she asked gently. I let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Neither. I got kicked out." Diane nodded slowly, like this made perfect sense. "You got people you can call?" I shook my head. My grandparents were dead. My dad had died when I was 12. And then I remembered Aunt Beth, my father's sister, the one my mother hadn't spoken to in 5 years. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe I do." "Diane, let me use the diner's phone," the old landline behind the counter with the coiled cord that barely reached to the booth. I stared at the numbers for a long time before I started dialing. I hadn't spoken to Aunt Beth in 5 years. Not since the massive blowout fight with my mother that ended with Beth being banned from our house. I was 12 then, barely understood what they were fighting about, something to do with my dad's life insurance and my mother's new boyfriend. All I knew was that one day Aunt Beth was at every Sunday dinner, and the next day her name was poison in our house. The phone rang 3 times. 4. I was about to hang up when I heard her voice. "Hello." She sounded exactly the same, warm and a little raspy, like she'd just finished laughing at something. "Aunt Beth." My voice cracked on her name. "It's Mary." There was a pause, and I heard her sharp intake of breath. "Mary? Sweetheart, is that you?" And just like that, I was crying again, the whole story spilling out in gasping, broken sentences. The missing jewelry, April's performance, my mother dragging me to the door, the rain, the diner, everything. Aunt Beth didn't interrupt once. When I finally ran out of words, there was silence on the other end, and I thought maybe the line had gone dead. Then she spoke, and her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "Listen to me very carefully. Your mother is wrong. April is lying. And you're coming here, to me, right now." I wiped my eyes with the towel Diane had given me. "I don't have any money for a bus ticket. I don't have anything." I heard movement on her end, the sound of drawers opening. "What's the address of where you are?" I read her the address, off a napkin on the table. "There's a Greyhound station 2 miles from that diner. I'm wiring you $300 right now. It'll be there within the hour. You buy a ticket to Portland, you get on that bus, and in 14 hours I will be waiting for you at the station. Do you understand me?" My throat was too tight to speak. "Mary," she said, and her voice was fierce now, protective in a way I hadn't heard in years. "Come home to me. Come home to your family, the real one, the one that actually loves you." Diane was watching me from across the diner, and when I looked up, she mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "Aunt Beth," I whispered. "Thank you." She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Thank me when you get here, baby girl. Now go get that money and get on that bus." "And Mary?" Your mother is going to regret this for the rest of her life. I sat in that Greyhound station waiting room, watching the clock and thinking about how we got here. The truth is, April had been building toward this moment for 5 years, ever since the day our father died. I was 12 and April was 10 when Dad's heart gave out in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. One minute he was mowing the lawn, and the next minute he was gone. My mother shattered into 1,000 pieces, and in that wreckage, April saw an opportunity. It started small. April would cry to Mom about how I wasn't helping enough around the house, how I'd said something mean to her when no one else was around, how I'd borrowed her favorite sweater without asking. None of it was true, but grief makes people believe things they normally wouldn't. Mom was so lost in her sadness that she couldn't see the pattern. Every time I tried to defend myself, April's eyes would fill with tears and she'd whisper, "Why is Mary being so cruel? Doesn't she know we need to stick together?" By the time I was 14, April had perfected her craft. She knew exactly how to make herself indispensable. She'd bring Mom tea without being asked. She'd rub her shoulders when Mom had headaches. She'd leave little notes around the house that said, "You're the best mom ever." Meanwhile, I was the complicated one, the one who reminded Mom too much of Dad with my dark hair and his stubborn jaw. The one who asked too many questions about the new boyfriend. The one who didn't just smile and go along. April figured out that Mom needed someone to blame for all the pain, and she made sure that someone was me. When Mom's jewelry started going missing, April was the one who gently suggested maybe I was taking things to sell. When money disappeared from Mom's purse, April was there to sadly report she'd seen me sneaking into Mom's room. It was never direct. April was too smart for that. She'd plant seeds and let Mom's grief and paranoia water them until they grew into something ugly and real. The worst part was watching April transform into Mom's favorite right in front of my eyes. She became the daughter who understood, the daughter who cared, the daughter Mom could rely on. And I became the problem child, the one who was always causing drama, always making things difficult. I tried to tell Mom what was happening, tried to explain that April was manipulating her, but that just made me sound paranoid and jealous. April had built a kingdom where she was the golden child and I was the villain, and by the time I was 17, that kingdom was so solid that all it took was one final performance to exile me completely. The intercom crackled. Now boarding. Route 47 to Portland. I grabbed my duffel bag and didn't look back. I didn't learn about the money until 3 weeks after I arrived at Aunt Beth's house in Portland. We were sitting at her kitchen table drinking coffee when she slid a manila folder across to me. "You need to see this," she said, her jaw tight. "Your mother doesn't want you to know, but you have a right to understand what you're actually dealing with." Inside were documents, legal papers with my father's name at the top. Trust documents, property deeds, investment statements. My father, it turned out, had been much better with money than anyone realized. He'd bought rental properties in our town back when real estate was cheap, invested carefully, saved aggressively. When he died, he left everything in a trust. The house, 3 rental properties, and nearly $400,000 in investments. The trust was structured so that my mother controlled everything until both April and I turned 25, at which point it would be split 3 ways. 1/3 to Mom, 1/3 to me, 1/3 to April. I stared at the numbers, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. "April knows about this?" Aunt Beth nodded grimly. "Your mother told her 2 years ago, when April turned 15. Beth wanted her to understand the family's financial situation. She tapped the paper with one finger. Do the math, Mary. When you turn 25 in 8 years, you get nearly $200,000 plus a rental property.
April gets the same.
But if something happened to you, if you were somehow out of the picture?" The realization hit me like cold water. It would all go to April. Aunt Beth's expression was dark. "Your mother's portion is guaranteed, but between the 2 of you girls? If you were gone, incapacitated, declared incompetent, or legally severed from the family, April would inherit your share. She'd go from splitting the estate to taking the whole daughter portion." We're talking about an extra $200,000 and another property. I thought about April's tears, her perfect devastation, the way she'd planted that evidence with surgical precision. This wasn't just sibling rivalry or favoritism. This was calculated elimination. She was trying to get rid of me, I whispered. Aunt Beth reached across the table and gripped my hand. I think she's been trying to get rid of you since the day she found out about this trust. Making you look like a thief, a liar, someone unstable. If she could destroy your reputation completely, make your mother believe you were dangerous or a criminal, she could push you out permanently. I felt sick. All those years of small cruelties, the lies, the manipulation, it wasn't just about being Mom's favorite. It was about money. It was about control. April had spent 5 years systematically dismantling my life because I was worth $200,000 to her, dead or gone. What do we do? I asked. Aunt Beth's smile was sharp. We document everything, and we wait for her to make a mistake. Now you know what my sister was really after. $200,000 and a future built on my erasure. But here's the thing about people who build kingdoms on lies. They always make one fatal mistake. If you want to see April's empire crumble in real time, make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next is poetry. The phone call came 6 weeks after I'd left. I was enrolled in a new high school in Portland, trying to build something that resembled a normal life, when Aunt Beth came into my room with her cell phone pressed to her chest. It's a woman named Diane, she said. From Fletcher's Diner. She says it's urgent. I took the phone, confused. Diane? Her voice came through fast and excited. Mary, honey, you're not going to believe this. I just saw your sister at Murphy's pawn shop on 5th Street. She was trying to sell jewelry. My heart started pounding. What kind of jewelry? Diane's laugh was bitter. Pearl earrings and a gold bracelet. I was in there selling some of my late husband's tools, and I saw her clear as day at the counter. The owner was examining the pieces when I heard him say they were worth at least $800. Your sister, the little one with the blonde hair, she looked nervous as hell. I sat down hard on my bed. Did she sell them? That's the thing, Diane continued. Murphy, the owner, he's old school. He asked for ID and provenance, wanted to know where a teenager got pearls like that. She claimed they were a gift from her grandmother, but she couldn't provide any documentation. Murphy told her he needed to verify ownership before he could buy them, and she got spooked and left. Diane paused. Mary, I followed her to the parking lot and got her license plate number. And I took a photo. Aunt Beth was watching me, her expression intense. Diane, I said carefully, those are the earrings April said I stole. The ones that got me kicked out. There was a long silence on the other end. When Diane spoke again, her voice was hard. That's what I figured. Listen, I've been a waitress for 30 years. I've seen every kind of con, every kind of lie. The second you walked into my diner soaking wet with that story, I knew something wasn't right. A girl who steals jewelry doesn't cry like you cried. She took a breath. I already called the police. I filed a report about suspicious activity, gave them the photos and the plate number. I also told them about the night you came in, about what you told me. My hands were shaking. Diane, why would you do this?
You don't even know me.
Her voice softened. My daughter was 17 once. She had a sister who made her life hell. I know what sibling cruelty looks like, and I know what innocence looks like. You were innocent. Aunt Beth took the phone from me. Diane? This is Beth Carroll, Mary's aunt. Can you send those photos to my email? I heard Diane agree, heard them exchange information. When Beth hung up, she looked at me with something fierce and triumphant in her eyes. Your sister just made her first real mistake, she said. And now we have proof. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Once the police started looking into April's story, the whole thing unraveled like a cheap sweater. Detective Sarah Morrison was assigned to the case, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and zero tolerance for lies. She called Aunt Beth 2 weeks after Diane's report and asked if she could speak with me. We met at the police station in my hometown, the place I'd sworn I'd never return to, and Detective Morrison laid out what they'd found. Your sister has a boyfriend, she said, sliding a photo across the table. Kyle Brennan, 19 years old, works at the mall. And Kyle has a problem with opioids that costs about $300 a week. I stared at the photo, a thin guy with bleached hair and hollow eyes. I'd never seen him before. April never mentioned a boyfriend, I said. Detective Morrison nodded. Your mother didn't know about him either. April was very careful. But Kyle wasn't as careful as she was. Apparently, Kyle had been picked up on a possession charge 3 days ago. Facing jail time and desperate, he'd made a deal. Full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. And what he told them was damning. April had been stealing from our mother for 8 months, small amounts at first, $20 here, $40 there. Cash from Mom's purse, jewelry she thought wouldn't be missed immediately. She'd been funding Kyle's habit and her own shopping addiction, racking up charges on prepaid credit cards our mother didn't know existed. But then your mother noticed, Detective Morrison continued. The missing jewelry, the cash discrepancies. She started asking questions. And April panicked. That's when April had orchestrated the frame job. She'd taken the items she'd already stolen, planted them in my room, and played the devastated sister discovering the truth. I was the perfect scapegoat, the older sister who already had tension with Mom, the one who questioned things, the one who wasn't the favorite. Kyle confirmed all of this? Aunt Beth asked, her voice tight. The detective nodded. He showed us text messages. April literally wrote out her plan to frame Mary. She told Kyle she needed to get rid of the competition before their mother figured out what was really happening. She pulled out printed screenshots. April also told Kyle about the inheritance trust. She said, and I quote, "Once Mary's gone, that 200 grand is mine. We can finally get out of this town." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Seeing it in writing, seeing the premeditation, the cold calculation, it was worse than I'd imagined. What happens now? I asked. Detective Morrison's expression was grim. We're charging April with theft, filing a false police report, and fraud. Kyle's testifying against her. And your mother is going to have to face what she did to you based on lies. She paused. I'm sorry, Mary. You deserved better than this. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, just a plain room with wood paneling and fluorescent lights that hummed too loud. I sat in the back row next to Aunt Beth, watching my mother and April sit at the defendant's table. Mom looked like she'd aged 10 years in 3 months, her hair grayer, her face drawn. April sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. No tears this time. The evidence was too overwhelming for performance art. Judge Patricia Kellner read through the charges with clinical efficiency. Theft, filing a false report, fraud. April's lawyer tried to argue that she was just a troubled teenager who'd made poor choices, that she deserved leniency. But Kyle's testimony had been detailed and damning. The text messages were brutal, and the pawn shop surveillance footage showed April clear as day trying to sell the pearls. When the judge asked April if she had anything to say, my sister looked up and said in a small voice, I'm sorry. Not to me. Just sorry. Floating in the air. Directed at no one. Judge Kellner gave her 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and ordered her to pay restitution for everything she'd stolen. No jail time because she was still a minor, but a permanent record that would follow her forever. The gavel came down, and it was over. April would go home with our mother, and I would go back to Portland with Aunt Beth, and the chasm between us would remain unbridged. I thought maybe Mom would try to talk to me after the sentencing. I thought maybe she'd pull me aside and say the words I'd been waiting months to hear. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I should have believed you. But when we walked out into the courthouse hallway, she looked right through me like I was a stranger. Aunt Beth stepped forward. Jane, we need to talk about what happens next. About Mary. My mother's face hardened. There's nothing to talk about. This is a family matter. She's your daughter, Aunt Beth said, her voice rising. Your daughter, who you threw into the street. Your daughter, who almost died because you chose to believe a liar over the child who never gave you a reason to doubt her. Mom's jaw tightened. I did what I thought was right at the time. I can't change the past. That was it.
No apology.
No acknowledgement of the harm. No recognition that she destroyed me based on nothing but April's crocodile tears. You're right, I said, and my voice sounded strange, calm and clear. You can't change the past, but you could at least admit you were wrong. My mother looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But then it was gone, replaced by the same cold distance. I did the best I could, she said. And that's when I knew she would never give me what I needed. Some bridges don't burn. Some bridges you have to walk away from on purpose. Before I show you how this ends, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling me, have you ever had to walk away from family to save yourself? Your story matters here. 7 years changed everything. I graduated from college with honors, landed a job at a marketing firm in Seattle, bought my own apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Sound. I built a life that April couldn't touch and my mother couldn't take away. Aunt Beth had become the parent I needed, the one who showed up to every graduation, every milestone, every moment that mattered. And then the letter came. It was from a lawyer representing the estate trust. Now that I was 24 and approaching the age of inheritance distribution, there were papers to sign, decisions to make about my share of the properties and assets. The meeting was scheduled at my mother's house, the same house I'd been thrown out of in the rain. I could have asked to meet anywhere else, but something in me needed to walk through that door one more time. Not as the desperate 17-year-old with nowhere to go, but as the woman I'd become in spite of everything. I pulled up in my car, a reliable Honda I'd saved up for myself, and sat in the driveway for a moment. The house looked exactly the same. Same beige siding, same flower boxes, same front door that had closed on me 7 years ago. I walked up the steps in my business casual clothes and heels, carrying my leather portfolio, and rang the doorbell. My mother answered. She looked older, smaller somehow, her eyes widening when she saw me. Mary, she said, and her voice cracked on my name. Jane, I replied, not calling her mom. That word belonged to someone who'd earned it. The lawyer was already set up at the dining room table, papers spread out in neat stacks. April wasn't there. I'd heard through the grapevine she'd moved to another state, cut ties with everyone after her probation ended. The lawyer explained the documents. I could claim my share of the trust, take ownership of one of the rental properties, walk away with the money my father had left me. Or I could sign it all away, sever my legal connection to the family estate entirely. My mother watched me read through the papers, her hands twisted together in her lap. Mary, she started, but I held up my hand. Don't, I said quietly. Don't say whatever you're about to say. I pulled out a pen and signed the severance documents, every single one. I was giving up $200,000 and a property, but what I was gaining was worth more. Complete freedom from this family and everything it represented. I stood up and looked at my mother one final time. You didn't lose a daughter that night, I said. You threw her away. There's a difference. One is tragedy. The other is choice. I walked to the door, and this time when I left, I was the one who chose to go. And I never looked back.